Hello, everyone. Welcome to another recorded discussion in Assessment and Learning 2. And in this topic, we will be learning about how to develop a scoring rubric. In this chapter, you are expected to define and explain the concept, components, and significance of scoring rubric in assessing student performance. Differentiate them between holistic and analytic rubric and general and task specific, and of course, distinguish them from checklist and rating scales, and construct your own holistic or analytic rubric with specific learning outcomes or competencies as an output in your GRASP framework from the last topic of authentic assessment. Now, let us define what is a scoring rubric. Brookhart in 2013 defined it as a coherent set of criteria for students that includes description of levels of performance, as Macmillan in 2007 defines it as scoring guide that uses criteria to differentiate between levels of student proficiency. Papam in 2011, on the other hand, described scoring rubric as scoring procedures in which it provides performance tests to students' responses. In other words, a scoring rubric is a guide used to assess performance, may it be process or product against a set of criteria. And these are the parts of scoring rubric. Essentially, we have two important parts, which are the criteria and the performance level. For example, in this slide, we have one criterion, which is participation, and we have the performance level, which are defined as excellent, good, satisfactory, marginal, pass, or fail. And including with the performance level, we have the scale of points. This will determine who is or what score is the highest and what score would be the lowest, and the descriptions also of or the descriptors also of the performance level. This will give us a qualitative value as to or qualitative data as to what does it mean if the student will get a rating of excellent or of good, and so on and so forth. So why should there be a level of performance? First is that it provides clear expectation. It sets a student as to what should there be performing at the end of that learning outcome. Also, for us teachers on our end, it gives us more consistent and objective assessment, as the nature of authentic assessment is very subjective. And of course, better feedback. This is also in our end that it helps us to communicate the result of that performance task to our students. So once there is a level of performance, it gives them an idea as to how we can say that they perform it well, or they can perform it better next time. So remember that when there is a level of performance, they are guided as to how well they are performing that process or product based output. Let us differentiate holistic and analytic rubric. Well, this may not be new to you anymore, but analytic rubric is what we use. For example, in the earlier slides, that is an example of analytic rubric. This is each level of criterion is actually defined or assessed in different level of performance. Holistic, on the other hand, is it does not need to list down the different level of performance. With across all criteria given, we can set one level of performance only. Now, deciding what to choose between analytic rubric and holistic rubric, it will depend on what's the purpose of the performance task you are letting your student to perform. First, you use analytic rubric if you want to define each criterion separately. The level of performance should be conducted differently, or should be defined differently. And of course, it involves a larger number of criteria. You can also use another consideration when to use analytic rubric is that when the task needs a lot of preparation, the task needs a lot of effort from the students, so that it is not um, holistically, or the feedback is not holistically given to them, and that you can itemize what feedback you can give to them, then you can use analytic rubric. When to use holistic rubric? When it needs a quick or gross judgment on the task being performed by the student. Now, these are the characteristic for classroom rubric or criteria. First is that it should be appropriate. When we make a criteria in your scoring rubric, you make sure that the that word is appropriate for the task you want them to perform or you want them to produce. For example, you would like to include the word accuracy, accuracy in the text, which they will be gathering or they will be writing in their paper. You make sure that you have defined what is accuracy properly, either in your holistic or analytic type of rubric. Definable in a sense that it is not jargon to them, it's not new to them, it doesn't need a high vocabulary to understand your rubric. And of course, it's observable, something that they can really perform if it is a process, or they can produce if it is a product type of output. It is distinct from one another. It is important that the criteria are different from one another so that there will be no repetitions of scoring. It's complete, something that from the first, for example, if it takes in a video presentation output, you have to consider whether you are going to check the script up until the video presentation or the video production. And of course, able to support descriptors along a continuum of quality. This is somehow understandable that when we make criteria for judging or criteria for checking the authentic assessment of our student, it should we are asking them to produce it with quality in a way that we are communicating how they will be rated with quality. Here are the steps for developing scoring rubric. First is identify the appropriate criteria to assess. Of course, you have to consider all the key points. If you want them to produce something and again do something based on the learning outcome or based on the learning competencies unpacked onto the learning outcome, you have to check what are the criteria provided or are the criteria you have made is enough or will suffice on the authentic assessment that they will do. Basic understanding is that the effort should replicate the scoring you will give it, you or the scoring rubric you will communicate with them. Step number two is for each criterion, formulate the description of performance along the continuum of quality. So you can now define whether for that criteria, what how do we say the performance is excellent, the performance is very good, this is performance is satisfactory, or fair, or the student needs improvement on that on that task or on that product. So here are other types of rubrics. First, we have task specific. So these are those we use for a certain, for example, a task that really needs specify a conclusion or gives an answer, for example. That means you cannot reuse them. Sometimes you can only ask them once, eh, uh, once in a quarter, or it could be once in a school year. For example, at a research output. So you can only have one rubric for that. And when we say general rubric, This is where when we can use uh, one rubric across all performance tasks. Example of this is in mathematics. There is a general rubric we follow for all problem solving type of performance task. Now, these are the importance of rubrics. First is rubrics help teachers to teach. This help us communicate how our learners will be rated. Also helps the learner on the on that, and that they know how they will be rated, and that they are aware as to how they will perform it. That's why we have also to consider, for example, for presentations or for role playing, such as are the audience impact included or not. So once we communicated the scoring rubric to them, it gives them an idea. Okay, that means to say we have to do extra effort to meet that criteria. Also, rubrics help coordinate instruction and assessment. The only explanation here is that we make an alignment between the learning competency to the teaching and learning activity and to the assessment we are giving to them. In this case, the assessment does not only focus on the pen and paper, but also on the authentic assessment, paired up with the correct scoring rubric. I tell you, there is no perfect scoring rubric, but we can definitely produce accurate criteria and different in the different level of performance, so that our student can perform the exact authentic task we want them to perform or produce. Now, these are other types similar to scoring rubric. We can also have checklist and rating scale. For checklist, these are just whether or not that observable trait is present, is observed or not. So we can just check or X. And here are the example of it. So if you want to have a checklist in research, you can only check, is there group work, is there worksheets, silent reading, teacher read to the class. So you can also do that. And sometimes it's better to have this one also, display a lack of enthusiasm and energy. So it's either yes or no. But take note, it's not that really comprehensive compared to the scoring rubric introduced earlier. Could be holistic or analytic. An example also it's provided in the material is, for example, we would like them to construct, or for example, to construct a paragraph. You can have it by checklist by just checking whether there is coherence. No need to discuss if it is present, adequately present or not, or the or the paragraph, or is there a body, or introduction, body, and conclusion. So you can have it still in checklist. However, the limitation is that um, it will it will not give us depth understanding or depth information on the performance of the output. Okay. Now let's proceed to another rating scale. A rating scale is a list of specific characteristic with a place for marking the degree to each characteristic is displayed. Usually we use the frequency rating. Sometimes we use the always manifested, often manifested, rarely, and so on and so forth. So the difference between checklist and rating scale is that you can pick, as in the different frequency scale, the rating scale, you can pick from 5 to 1, it could be 4 to 1 or 7 to 1. On a Likert scale, the performance of the performance or the output of that learner. However, in a checklist, you will just either check or X the occurrence of that behavior or of that observable trait. So please take note of that. This is an example of where we can say it's a rating scale. So this is the current teaching demonstration rating scale we have in our School of Teacher Education. So as you can see, we have here the different frequency. We have the outstanding, very satisfactory, satisfactory, fair, and needs improvement. So in each observable trait, the supervisor or the observer can rate the pre-service teacher from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And from this, we can calculate the number of scores, adding that to the number of possible scores or all over this different criteria. And that would be it for scoring rubric. I think a formative assessment will be posted in the Google Classroom for this topic. Thank you so much, and I hope that you will be able to finish our GRASP framework as asked or as provided as a task in our Google Classroom. Thank you.